Hey, welcome to your next best step with Brek Cockrell, the locker room for purpose-driven leaders. This is where we slow down, reflect, and we take our next best step through real stories, practical strategies, and rooted leadership wisdom. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, even the best leaders need a coach in their corner. Welcome to your next best step, the locker room for purpose-driven leaders. This is where we slow down, reflect, and take our next best step through real stories, practical strategies, and rooted leadership wisdom. I'll help you lead with some clarity and intentionality, and so that you don't have to just wing it. Because I believe every leader deserves to be led well, and every leader needs a coach in their corner. So here I am, BC, with you today, and I've got my good friend Kristian Andersen here today. And just a quick little introduction. Kristian, you and I met summer of 2018, I think. Was that the first Lions group? Was 18?
Probably, yeah. If you had asked, I would have said 8 or 9 years ago. So that maps tracks.
So Kristian, I had heard of Kristian for many years through my brother Thad. Thad and Kristian were friends, had become buddies in college, and we may or may not talk a little bit about that. Who knows where we'll go on that? But finally got to meet the one and only Kristian Andersen, husband of one, father of six, and a friend to many. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for just writing my new Twitter bio, by the way. I love that. Father of one, husband of one, father of six, and friend of many. I'll take it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, I say that because you probably don't know this, but you have inspired me. Like, one of the things that I have so benefited from the Lions group. So we're going to probably reference. Let me set up. I think that you're the third or fourth Lions friend that we've had to the episode on the podcast. And so, but just for those who haven't heard about the Lions group, this is a collection of dudes from all over the country who the one connection was my brother Thad. Some of us knew each other before, whatever, but the one connection that we all had and that we came together in the summer of 2018 up in Montana was Thad. And so it was awesome to be able to meet all the guys and to meet you. And one of the things that I've observed over our time together was friendships. You've done an amazing job of collecting friendships and like meaningful friendships. Like not just with my brother Thad, like many others. And then I hear about other little chapters of Kristian's, networks of friends, and I'm like, wow. I mean, right out of the gate, like, what was it, Kristian? Like, did you intentionally do that? Was that something that was somebody said, hey, it's really important? Like, I know show me your friends, I'll show you your futures, all that, right? Like, that's all true and good. But to be intentional about building friendships, it's not something that most of us, will just say guys, put a lot of attention to.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, I'd say it was probably modeled for me to some extent as a young person. Like, I saw my folks take friendship seriously. Their friends weren't purely a function of who lived on the street or who they worked with. There were always interesting people coming into my home from different parts of the world or the country, and And I think I probably early on, yeah, saw that modeled for me. Probably also early on, kind of grokked the implications, the sacrifice, the investment that's required
Mm.
to do that. And I'd say in my kind of early adulthood, I mean, there wasn't like I woke up one day and was like, you know, I want to get really good at being a friend. It was probably a little more organic than that, but um, it's something I took seriously, and I'd say it probably started in early adulthood, and I mentioned sacrifice. It does, it's expensive to have friends,
Yeah.
and I don't mean
Time,
monetarily.
talent, like it, your time, you showing up, being present, being intentional, like all that's expensive.
It's expensive, and it's cognitively expensive. It can be emotionally expensive.
Mhm.
Like any
Yes.
other investment, anytime you make an investment, you're necessarily not investing in a bunch of other stuff, right? When you invest in a friendship outside of your family, you are, at least in theory, not taking that time or that energy and maybe pouring it into little Bobby, or even your marriage.
Right.
Now, I would argue that it comes back to
Yeah.
your spouse and to your
Yeah.
children tenfold, maybe 100-fold over the
Right.
long arc of time. But yeah, it's expensive, and it's worth it. And friendships aren't, by nature of being friendships, they're not transactional. But I do find it helpful, like the analogy of a portfolio of friendships. That sounds vulgar,
Yeah.
uh, I don't, but I use that purely as a way to express maybe a bigger idea, which is in the same way that, if you invest without intention in any part of your life, the result of that's going to be pretty much what you expect it's going to be, right?
Right.
Which is not good. And, but so thinking about friendships and thinking about investing in those with intention, I mean, we love to talk about compounding, and we talk about compounding and finance, obviously, all the time. You think about, hey, if you start saving for your 401k when you're 20, you'll have,
Yeah.
X% more than if you start when you're 30 or 40, or so on and so forth. And, um, we know that's true when it comes to things like physical fitness, right? If you want to get strong, right, time in the gym compounds.
Yeah.
Well, the same is true for uh, friendships. And if you want to be rich in any area of your life, the earlier you kind of contend with the notion of compounding, and the sooner you start making those investments
Mm.
and caring for that,
Yeah.
the sooner you're going to be rich. And I'll tell you, for me, the one thing I want to be, the one area I want to be obscenely wealthy in
Mm.
is friendships.
Mm. That's so good.
I want to be a friendship billionaire.
Yeah. Come on. I love that. Well, you have here's another thing that I have observed about you from like the first ride drive out to, the big house from from the airport.
From Billings,
Is
Montana.
yes, is and I would say uh you've helped foster this in me a little bit, for sure. Even more so. And this is, and I've heard you talk a lot about this, curiosity.
Mm.
You're a curious human being.
Hmm.
And I I came to curiosity late in life. It was out of necessity when I discovered that you know, kind of curious here. I'm in a context that no that I'm the only person in this whole context that kind of has had my upbringing, my thinking. So I might need to understand a little better about everybody else's context and stop living
Mm.
in the world that I think everybody else is living in my world. So that was probably a journey I started, 20 years ago or so. But one of the things that every time I'm around you, Kristian, is and I kind of laugh about it because you're curious about lots of things. And
Hmm.
I love that about you.
Hmm.
And it's caused me to be, you know what? I need to be a little more curious in even like it doesn't matter, wolves, right? Or whatever.
You mean coyotes, but that's okay. It's
Coyotes. Yeah, there
forgivable.
you
It's
go. Yes.
forgivable because
I'm
Lewis
sorry.
and Clark referred to coyotes as prairie wolves. So even they made that mistake, Breck.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I mean, where does that come from? How
Mm.
did you foster this sense of curiosity that you have that's really one of your biggest values that people experience on the other side of Kristian? I know that
Mhm.
he's going to be curious.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was sharing with somebody at lunch earlier this week. They had said like a couple of affirming things about me, and then they said, "Would you agree with that?" And I was like, "Well, I'll tell you." This guy's name was Mark. I was like I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I that would have made me very uncomfortable. I'm gonna land the plane here, I promise. But it would have made me very uncomfortable hearing things that I now can see as like true
Mm,
about me. And I think the reason I was uncomfortable was um, I don't know. This is going to sound very juvenile, but when somebody would pay me like a compliment,
mm,
I mean, obviously there's a part of you that likes being seen and likes being celebrated and so on and so forth. Like, so there's that like surface level reaction, but at a deeper level, I always, I think at the end of the day, I kind of felt like they're only saying that because they feel sorry for me. Isn't that a weird thing?
mm. Oh,
Isn't that a
that's interesting.
weird thing? So if somebody was like, Christian, you're
Mm,
X or you're Y,
sorry
you're
for
good
me.
at making friends. I'd be like, what do they see in me that they feel they need to say that in
Mm,
order to? Isn't that wild?
yeah.
Totally unrelated to the question you're asking. But
No.
I mention it just to say because you may see me nod now more than I used to nod. When you're like, you're a curious person. I think you're good at being curious. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. And I'm able to kind of accept you saying it
Yeah.
and also believe it to be a true and good thing.
Hmm.
Um, so you look at all these like traits people have, whatever, industrious or hardworking or curious or affable or whatever else. You know, I think to this is not a very fashionable view, but I think to some extent those things get fixed in childhood
Hmm.
and they can be modified, expanded upon, they can shrink, they can grow,
Hmm.
but for the most part, a lot of those things kind of get formed and fixed in childhood.
Hmm.
So why for me? Because I've always been curious, and I was curious as a little kid. I was one of those precocious, kind of wore my parents out, right? Quit asking questions, be quiet. You know, um, I think a big part of it was like my family of origin. My mom and my dad are the two most different people that you can imagine copulating and having offspring. Okay. I mean, in terms of their families of origin, nationalities, the geographies they grew up in, the ideologies and belief systems that they were raised with, their
Really?
personal, I mean, I'm sure you could go find a more extreme version, but this was a relatively extreme version. And there's some downsides to that, I'm certain. But I'll tell you one of the good sides is I did not grow up in like a static, homogenized environment, right? Parents voting for in presidential elections for presidents in two different parties. You don't see
Yeah.
that a lot. Usually mom and dad are aligned. And
Right.
um, so I think part of it was I just grew up in a milieu where there was a lot of different. opinions and interests on display. And I took that as something that was A, normal, and B, as license for me to indulge my own interest in areas of curiosity. Um, with all that being said, I do think just like any other behavior, um, compounding applies to curiosity as well.
Yeah.
The aforementioned compounding. And the more you engage in it, the more you both follow your interest and I think part of being curious is the ability to go follow other people's interests
Mm,
before they're yours
yeah.
as well. And when you see the fruits of that, and when you're young, you're not conscious of the fruits of it, but all of a sudden, like good things start happening.
Yeah.
Luck starts showing up in weird ways because your mind and your heart has covered so much more surface area. The way you're able to relate to people. I mean, honestly, I think the curiosity piece and the vigor with which I pursue friendship are actually inextricably linked.
Mm,
Because I think a curious mind, a beginner's mind, allows you to show up. And you know me, there's a bunch of stuff where I'll show up and say, "Hey, I know a lot about this. Let me hold court for a minute." But there's a lot of other areas, especially when you're on the front part of your whatever journey of curiosity,
yeah.
you show up with questions.
Yeah.
And if you want to build a friendship with somebody,
Mm,
you don't do it by talking at them.
yeah.
You do it by being curious about them. And when you're curious about somebody else, those or their family or what they do for a living or where they grew up or who their favorite football team is, they feel they are being seen,
Yeah.
you know, and not in like a dispassionate I'm observing you way, but in a I have something to contribute to this relationship.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a I think especially in leadership circles, people talk about cultivating curiosity. They talk about it being very important. But I think very few people actually treat it like a discipline,
Yeah.
you know. Very few people build systems required
Mm,
in order for you to become a perpetually curious person. But those who do, it's an extreme unfair advantage,
yeah.
especially if you're someone like me that's really quite, and this isn't like false humility, but just bouncing somewhere between slightly below average and slightly above average in almost every material discipline.
Yeah.
Um, to break out of that, if you can really curate and indulge curiosity in a more systematic way, it's like the biggest life hack.
Yeah. No, well, so this podcast is called Your Next Best Step because a part of kind of my why statement, what I do is, and I've kind of reflected on this all the way back into my teenage years, was I love creating environments and experiences. And I think part of that came from seeing my dad, who was a pastor, in his own best way. He created environments and experiences at the church when I was a kid, and
Hmm.
so I'm just following, along as a preacher's kid, right? Me, Jonathan. And there were things I still remember, some environments, some spaces he created, and some in experiences he created that still I can go back to and like, and I
Hmm.
think I didn't realize it at the time, those were kind of the catalyst, the origin of me thinking about like, huh, man, that's pretty cool. And and from a young teenage till this day, I love creating environments and experiences. And so,
Was your daddy curious?
uh, Christian, that's an interesting thought. I think he grew up in a theology of certainty.
Yeah.
And I think the world that he kind of grew up in, it was better to be certain than curious.
Yeah, yeah. Mm, You know, it's interesting. There's uh, another word that is like tangentially related, curiosity, and I think maybe speaks to what you're talking about is mystery.
Mm,
And to be curious is to acknowledge there are there's a lot of mystery in the
mm,
world, you know, and there's a lot of investigation to be done. It kind of never ends. And yeah, when you grow up, as you said, in a theology of certainty or a philosophy of certainty or a family of certainty, there's a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it. That I think that, quite frankly, can be stifling to
yeah,
this idea of embracing the mystery of life and using that, you know, as a fuel to learn and to be really high in openness as you learn, because it's not learning just to investigate things to confirm what you already know. You
right.
know what I mean? Curiosity isn't building a case. You know,
Yeah.
it's that's
It's
different.
exploring.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's exploring. That's right. It's investigation. You know, the case, you build the case, the lawyer builds the case after the detective is done with the investigation,
yeah,
right? But that first epoch, um, I do think it kind of requires a level of comfort with the ambiguous, and you know, being drawn to the mysteries of the universe.
yeah. I have three E's, and it kind of I hadn't really thought about your system of curiosity, but I guess this is where this is would be my system. So and even working with leaders, right? I'm coaching leaders, and so one of the things I want to do right out of the gate is just explore.
Yeah.
And then once I explore, then I start to examine. And then once that has happened, we begin to expose,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's do you see like, oh, I see, and then all of that is to hopefully elevate. So to if I'm working with a leader and they're asking me like what's the pain point, what are you frustrated with, why
Mhm.
would you need a coach in your corner, right? There's something, right? I'm trying to get from either I drove the car into the ditch and I can't get out, or I'm trying to get, um it's okay but I think it could be better, or man, I would love to get it from here to like to this best, like, okay, well then let's explore. And so I think, I think going back to my dad and talking about growing up in a pastor's home, growing up in a faith community, very strong, very, opinionated, like there wasn't a whole lot of wiggle room in the things we could do or not do, right?
Yeah.
So but one of the things, I would hear pastors and dad and other is the mystery of God.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
hard to think that God was mysterious when everything was built around certainty. And so when your whole theological framework is built on certainty, and then you go juxtapose that against a mysterious God, I'm like, I never could quite
Yeah.
understand that.
You know, we're definitely underweight on the mystery of God. You know, whatever from I'd say all flavors of Christianity in particular, but my hunch is that it transcends even Christianity. When folks talk about God, I think we're real underweight on that, and I think it's one of the reasons why. Not, I know this isn't a theology podcast, Brek, but I think, well, I'll tell you, like one of the things I've been exploring, not because I'm running toward it as a practitioner, I'm just curious about it, at the risk of sounding redundant, is the Eastern Orthodox faith. And Eastern Orthodoxy is having a moment right now. It is really
It is.
certainly amongst young men, fastest growing um, kind of subset of the Christendom. And I think I believe that one of the reasons for that, my contention for one of the reasons of that is that they make space. They make a lot of room for mystery.
Mm,
They make a lot of room. They don't really see as much of a distinction between, well, here's the world and the spirit world, right? It's like, what are you talking about? It's like all one thing. It's the same opinion I have about people who use the term work-life balance. I'm like, no, it's all life. Like there's no distinction,
yeah.
right? There might be a distinction on your calendar, but in reality, all that gets fit into one bucket, which is called, life.
Mm,
And I think that's one of the things that's really kind of winsome about the kind of Orthodox faith is they make a lot of room for the unknown, the mystery. Some people call it the enchanted world. So even that like Tolkien-esque language, which I think is listen, we've spent the last 100 years trying to achieve ultimate um, uh, certainty,
yeah.
you know, and finally, I think this young generation has said, okay, that's probably not a mission worth pursuing.
Right.
I'm going to embrace the uncertainty, which is adjacent to this idea of mystery.
Yeah. No, I,
That's why even like a podcast like this is interesting, Breck, because it's ostensibly about leadership. And for those of you that may end up listening to this, um, Breck kind of lays out here's some kind of high level stuff we might talk about, right? And I found myself even getting like wrapped around the axle on leadership. Well, what do you mean leadership? And and so I mean, there's been 10,000 books written on the topic. There's people who make bajillion dollars speaking, teaching, talking about it. People are clearly interested, and they have a lot of certainty
mhm.
around how you do it, what good looks like, right? And maybe you and I can talk about this at some point even today. It's
Yeah.
just like, I mean, when you talk about practical advice, the very nature of that is it's kind of a one size fit, change your oil every 3,500 to 5,000 miles. That's practical advice, right?
Yeah.
But there are some vehicles where you should change your oil more frequently based on the nature of its use. I drive a diesel pickup truck. I only have to change my oil every 7,500 miles. So that, so it's even in a discussion about around leadership,
Yeah.
I think inviting more mystery and more openness into like what is good, what does good look like. I think people would gain a lot from that.
Yeah. No, I agree. One of the things that and I've referenced it here on the podcast before, but I think one of the things that I guess as it relates to leadership, um I got connected to leadership in my early 20s. I was coaching um a kid in high school who was best friends with Thad, Troy Pleo.
Hmm.
And Troy's dad, um, he owned an electrical company there in Tampa. And this was back like in 1986. And he and his wife Sharon, they had just gotten back from Dallas from a Zig Ziglar conference. And
Yeah.
Zig Ziglar in
What a
1986.
great name. Can we just give it up for Zig's just branding? It's
Yes,
just amazing.
it is. He was the first coaching kind of guru. Like, so you could fly to Dallas, you could get certified for probably unreal amount of money, and then you had a bag full of VHS tapes, and you got these big red binders that you could take your staff, people through. And so, um, so he said, "Hey, you want to? I'm taking the staff through it. You want to join in?" I'm like, "Sure, love it."
Mm,
And so it was the beginning. It was I think a 3 or 4 4 day thing on all things leadership.
yeah.
But Zig, as he did, he started with the person, right? It was all about being grounded. It was all about the you. It wasn't
Mm,
about like them. It's about the you. And so all of those phrases, you need a neck up from the checkup. I'll see you at the top. You know, you can get everything in life you want if you help enough people get what they want. I was 25 and it lit something within me that to this day still like it intrigues me about how do we lead ourselves and lead others. And I think this, I'd love to hear your view. Like, uh, do you think everybody's a leader?
mm, mm.
Let's just start there.
Yeah. Um, I think at any given point in time, everyone is going to be either tacitly or explicitly called upon to lead. Yes. And that kind of maybe gets to the crux of my curiosity around what do we mean by leadership, right? Because do we mean the CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Do we mean a small business owner? Do we mean a pastor? Do we, and, you know, if a word, if a word gets smeared, if it covers enough surface area, it stops to be from a like taxonomy perspective, it stops being useful, right? So, and you've seen a billion versions of this, right? I like to pick on the word trauma, right? We've taken the word trauma and we've like denatured it by applying it to everything, right? So many people have. In leadership, we run the risk of not defining if we don't define the context in which we're using the word, if we don't have a common understanding of how we're both using the word, then it kind of just
Mm,
means nothing. I guess at the at the most reductivist elementary level, it it would not be possible to be a leader unless there was some followership associated with it, right? So if you decide to move to Alaska and live the life of a hermit and never interact with another human being as as long as you live, I think in an objective sense, it would be difficult to think of yourself as an active leader in that context. Okay. It doesn't mean you're not responsible for shepherding your own heart to some extent and taking your own thoughts captive. So maybe you could argue kind of leading myself, but again, I think if you stretch it to its logical conclusion, it stops, it kind of stops making sense. So like, well, then what is a leader, right? Well, I mean, in its most vulgar definition, it's someone with followers. Okay. Now uh, that's nothing to do with good leader, bad leader, important leader, unimportant leader. But if you're the person in the front of the band with the stick, with the baton, you're leading the band, right?
yeah.
Um, where I where I struggle a little bit, I was sharing with you earlier how I used to kind of recoil at certain affirmations because um, I kind of felt like, well, the only reason they're saying that is because they're trying to make me feel good, or so I either thought they feel sorry for me or they want something from me,
Mm,
right? And that's a me thing, not a them
yeah.
thing, by the way. I 7 years of therapy has cured me of that. Um, but the word leader I still have issues with,
Yeah.
right? And I still have issues with it. What I mean, as it relates to me personally, I
Yeah.
work with people that I point to and I'm like, that's a leader, like they look like a leader, they talk like a leader, they're grown, they act like a grown up. Um, and I've always and the irony is, I mean, I've run businesses, I've employed lots of people. I've led organizations in the kind of both functional and technical sense. So of course I understand, like, objectively speaking, I have led, ergo I am some form of leader. But I think what I've gotten like more comfortable with as I think about it now, and as I've been able to process what other people have shared with me, is um, it doesn't really matter what you call yourself. If you are providing purpose, if you're helping connect individuals' potential to their purpose, to the organization's purpose, um, uh, if you are inviting somebody on a journey and they say yes, you're a leader. And that is in every domain of life. There's other terms you know, I think Nick, who you had on a previous episode, was talking about the definition of entrepreneurship. And I
Mm.
think he said something like one who bears the risk, or it's something, I can't remember what
Yeah,
he
yeah.
said. But I was like, oh, that's cool. I've never heard that. I actually don't think anyone pursuing any type of enterprise is an entrepreneur. So I'll take the other side of the bet from Nick. He cast a very wide net, and I love the idea behind what he was saying. But I actually think that when we uh, dilute the denotation and connotation of words sufficiently, they lose their utility. So I've like kind of dug in on what I think is maybe a more specific definition of entrepreneur, as opposed to maybe small business owner or things of that
Oh,
nature.
hey, let's put a pin in that. I want us to get back to that because
Yeah, okay,
I
yeah.
would
And
love,
I'm being long-winded anyway. So
I would like to come back to that because I think that is interesting because you can help me define what I am at this point. Because I've
okay,
had
all
this
right.
question going on. Am I an
Yeah,
entrepreneur? Am I a businessman guy? Am I like, what am I? Right?
yeah,
Right
yeah,
now,
yeah,
as
yeah,
it
yeah.
relates to leadership.
Mm,
So here's my thoughts on it. Uh, I think God has created us and given us now um, life, and from the day we're able to be responsible for ourselves. I think we're called to lead ourselves.
mm, mm.
So I was in a context where, as a pastor, I was in a community that was very under resourced in all things that, the check the boxes. Education, less than 25% of the adults had a high school education, had graduated from high school in the neighborhood we had our church and we pastored in. So when that happens, there's all kinds of generational issues that begin to happen,
Yeah.
poverty, all these things, right? And so here I was. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, Midwest. I've been a part of high functioning organizations, churches. I was a basketball coach as college, like all of these things, right? So now I'm in this context, and I'm looking at folks that were walking to the church, right? So we had walkers, riders, and drivers. So walkers were people who lived in the community. And I'm like, I'm going to put the walkers at the center of our concern,
Hmm.
right? Then I'm going to put riders at the next, kind of like people who get on a bus and
Yep.
drive here, wait for an hour to get connected in the rain to be able to get here. And then drivers, people who were upwardly mobile enough to have a car and they could drive themselves to that space. So
Yep.
so I had some mentors that say, hey, if you follow the way of Jesus, Jesus put the most under-resourced people at the center of his concern,
Mm.
not the most resourced. And so here I was, Christian, in this context, and I'm sitting around. I'm like, I never thought myself as a highly educated person, but I had a college degree. It took me 10 years to get it, but you know, but I had
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, in here, like how do you contextualize leadership, leading? And so many never thought themselves. We right across the street was a building for highly functional special needs adults, and so they would come and they would be a part of our community of faith, right? And so we used to always say, hey, if we want you to come and we want you to be a part of it so you can serve here, well, we got a spot for everybody. Well, Christian, all of a sudden I've got adults who are special needs and like, oh, and so we're like, what can they do? Like what task are they able to do? Like, so here I was up against speaking about leading, and then people who typically were never considered leaders ever before. I had to reconstruct, does Jesus see them as leaders? And what if they're never leading anybody other than their nephew, their cousin, the neighbor, the upstairs, right? And so I started thinking, and I could be wrong on this. I don't think it's a right or wrong. It's just my view is that everyone's a leader, that God has given us life, and that one day we're going to be held accountable for the stewardship of this life. Leadership is it's we're going to be held accountable, and it's strategic, but it's also doesn't last forever. So what are we going to do? So leading. So part of what I do and I try to emphasize with leaders is it's hard to lead others well if you're not willing to lead yourself well.
Hmm.
And so
That sounds true as you say it. I mean, it is, back to what does a leader do? I mean, a leader, a good leader is making decisions and acting in a coherent and congruent way, even when no one's keeping score and people aren't watching, right? So it would serve to reason that if you can't, to use your language, lead yourself and lead yourself well, I mean, listen, don't hire a personal trainer that's in worse shape than you. Okay, that's good advice, right?
right.
And I think that that same dynamic plays out in leadership. So to the, you know, uh, if if somebody shows up who doesn't have some level of self-mastery, which maybe even be another way of talking about kind of leading yourself, they're not going to be able to do that for others. So that's what you shared sounds, intuitively true.
Do you have, Christian, do you have, I know that um, you have helped launch and invested in, at this point, would it be hundreds of companies?
I mean, between starting and investing and backing and serving on the board, yeah, well over 100.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, and we haven't even like, uh, here's a little plug. Christian lives his second home. He grew up in Arkansas mostly, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
But now home is Indianapolis,
Indianapolis,
the
Indiana.
heart of Hoosier country.
That's right. Go Irish.
Championship game is coming on. Hey, I'm rooting all for Coach Sig and the Hoosiers. It is, we were talking earlier, it is an amazing leadership story from what Coach
Hmm.
Sig did. Turned it around, right? All this kind of stuff. I mean, amazing. But Christian, you have a company like I'm going to do what Coach Zig did. If you want to know more about the successful side of Kristian Andersen, just Google him. He wins.
He tries. Just Google me,
He,
I try. That's what I would
he's
say.
trying.
I
You've
would
had
say
a
I
lot
try.
of wins, brother,
Yeah.
and it's
You,
cool. I love hearing. I've listened to several of your interviews and stuff, and just the personal. Like, listen, I love it, but I there's a lot of interviews out there that you talk about like entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff. But what about values? When you think about
mm, mm.
values, okay, so Simon Sinek has his kind of golden triangle. What's your why?
Yep.
Everybody needs to know your why.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
I think it's important, but here's what I found. If you don't have a what connected to your why, the why is just stays up here at 30,000 level, just kind of floats around. I think if you don't have a what and a how connected to your why, you're never going to see its fullest potential.
Well, it's interesting you use the term potential. I uh my family has a set of values that I've really tried to just export to all aspects of
So your
my,
family, meaning what?
my
Coming from your
wife and
mom
my
and
six
dad,
children.
or the
Mhm.
Anderson family, you and Brandy
Yeah,
and
the
the group.
family. Yep, yep. Not always beautifully or perfectly executed upon, but something we codified early on. We try to talk about regularly, um, and I'm happy to share that. What I would say is though, when you think about values, another one of those words, right, that we kind of use and bandy
Right.
about, and I would challenge people to at least have a crisp personal understanding of what you mean when you say
Yeah.
value,
Yeah.
right? And
If
if
you
you
have a
look
better
at,
name for it, then I'm all ears. But I've looked at
yeah,
different ways to
yeah.
kind of express these values or these
No, I
uh
think values is good. I think
yeah,
there's my advice is to not invent new words when existing vocabulary that's well understood already exists. So I don't, I love the word value. My critique would be more about how people use them.
yes.
Um, but like in my family, our values are grace, growth, and courage. Those
Mm,
are the three things that we want to use as filters in decision making as individuals and familially. And underneath each one
so
of those,
grace,
mhm,
growth, and courage.
yes, yes,
Love
sir.
that.
Yep, yep. And when you look at those things, they have there's a lot of stuff you can hang on that. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
like growth is a simple one, which is like when given the option, we want to be oriented toward growing. That could be intellectually, spiritually, physically, relationally. Um, you know, Grace, that's a big one. And there's a lot packed into that one,
Yeah.
right? But what does that mean? What lives inside of the value of grace?
Yeah.
Well, forgiveness,
Hmm.
humility, hospitality.
Hmm.
Another word that I think is misunderstood. I mean, hospitality fundamentally means caring for others.
Yeah.
We think it means putting the good china out when you have supper over. And that's one way that you can certainly care for people. But sometimes it means eating off paper plates
Yeah.
because that's where the person you're meeting where they're at,
Hmm.
right? Maybe they're going to be intimidated by the fine china. So it excuse me. So those are but the high level values, grace, growth, and courage, and then there's just a lot of ways that those get instantiated, very imperfectly, but that we attempt to instantiate. In my business, High Alpha, we have three core values. Um, and we crafted them as imperatives.
Mm.
Okay. So dream big, move fast, and expect more.
Mm.
Now, what's
Say,
interesting,
say those again.
move fast, dream big, and expect more. Okay. Now, what's interesting about those is they're imperatives, right? They have verbs attached to
Yeah.
them. You look at most corporate values and it's transparency, teamwork,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of sounds like Charlie Brown's parents talking. So in addition to them being imperative, one of the things that I think is interesting, and I think this is reflective of our family's values as well, is that they're often in conflict with one another. Now, people would say, hold on a second, that doesn't sound good. Why would you want your values to be in conflict with one another? Well, because if you're using your values to inform decision making, there can really only ever be one priority. I mean, the word priority, okay, uh, didn't have, there was no plural version of that word historically. There's a lot of debate as to the first time the word priorities entered the Western lexicon, but it was fairly recently. Okay. So the definition of priority is one. You can't have priorities. Okay. You can have a lot of stuff that's real important, you know,
Right.
but the word priority means one.
One.
What's the thing,
Yeah.
right? So as a business, if you're trying to make a decision, and you're using your values as a way to guide your decision-making process, and you're using those values as a way to help those who you work with make decisions in your absence, um, they some level of conflict, I think, is very important. I'll give you an example. So move fast and dream big. Expect more. Well, which one, Kristian? Do you want me to move fast on this thing, or do you want me to dream big? Or do you
Yeah.
want to have sky high expectations? Because you can't have all three. They can't all
Right.
three be priorities. You can strive for all those three, for you to maximize
Yes.
those three things. But there are some decisions
Yes.
where we're going to
Huh?
say the most important thing right now is that this gets done by the end of the week,
Yeah.
or it's going to incur some crazy tax liability, or someone's going to lose their job. And so we're going to prioritize the value of moving fast in the context of this specific decision. And those are things, it's two like easy things when people think about values that I would encourage them to consider, both personally and for their enterprise, which is to the extent you're able, make them imperatives,
Mm.
attach a verb to them,
That's
right?
so good. I was just going to say that. Like, I was just talking to a high level CEO. The brand, everybody, you would know it. Everybody, it's in our cupboards. It's right. And he said our values used to be nouns. I
Mm,
changed them. They're all verbs. They're
yep.
imperatives. Like, I love that.
Yep. I think that's important. And then like I said, architect them in such a way that any one of those values can and in many cases should be prioritized in service of the particular decision you're making. And again, I say slightly in conflict. I don't mean diametrically opposed. You can't
Mhm.
have the value of be gracious and be a jerk, right? Those are never going to work. Those
Yeah.
are never going to work together. But something that forces you to make a prioritization decision about what you're going to live into and the decisions you're going to make, I think is really helpful. I'm not sure how we got on that topic, but that's
Well,
that's
I
one of
love
the
it
core values.
because it speaks to I'm a firm believer that, I think you and I have had this conversation when John Townsend, when I went and was doing some studying in executive coaching and everything. And so he was talking about, he said, he used this term, kind of this the fruit tree. And when he first started to explain what it is as coaches, executive coaches, that we need to focus on. And he said, how crazy is it if I walked up to this apple tree and I took the apple off and I bit into it, all of a sudden I start screaming at it for not being an orange or being the wrong kind of apple or not ripe or whatever. And you were
Yeah.
observing me, you'd go, John, why are you yelling at the fruit? The fruit can do nothing to change what it is right now.
Hmm.
And he
Hmm.
says, what we do as coaches is we get the attention off of the fruit and we bring it back to the root. And if you want the fruit to be a certain way, if you want the fruit to be like, you can't, once the fruit is fruit, it you You can't, you got to go back to the root. And so we got
Hmm.
to pay attention. We got to pay attention. We got to help leaders understand the importance of human beings more than human doings.
Hmm.
We're both.
Hmm.
We're human beings and human doings. But most of the time we spend most of our time, talent, treasures, 95% on the human doing side
Yeah.
versus investing in the human being side.
Yeah.
And so this what we're talking about for those who are listening, these are the things that I want to emphasize is the human being side, these values, these things that help us. And so I find it interesting. So you have your own family values that you
Hmm.
operate by.
Hmm.
How does that impact how you lead in the organization that you lead?
Hmm. You know, I wrote, yeah, uh, we just talked about values. There's another constellation of words that are oftentimes used in concert with the word value.
Okay, let's hear them.
Uh, Mission,
Mm-hmm.
vision,
Yep.
goals,
Yep.
this
Right.
constellation of words that we use, certainly as leaders in business, probably a good idea to think deeply about all of those things in the context of your life outside of work as well. The word that I have really become obsessed with over the last few years is purpose.
Mm.
And, I think this gets a little bit to the why and what conversation we were just having. Um, I was at an event and somebody was talking about purpose at the individual level and, what's your purpose, your raison d'etre, why are you here, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole bunch of like patent answers that people will deliver, um, especially if you're in kind of like a church world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember this person up on stage talking about it, and they were like, "Just to be a great father, just to be a great husband, just to glorify God, et cetera, et cetera." And I was like, "Well, if your purpose is to be a great husband, what happens if your wife dies? Like, if that's your purpose, that's why
Yeah.
you're here. If your purpose is to be a great father, and you don't ever have children,
Yeah.
or some tragedy befalls your family, and those go away." And it really got me to thinking about purpose as something that transcends like a specific role or
Mm.
title
Yeah.
that I have. And I went back and I wrote I mean, usually stuff like that is like in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
But for some reason, this like really like stuck in my craw.
Yeah.
And I began to work on a personal, like why am I here? What's my purpose? And it was really kind of an intersection of like, all right, can I digress for a minute?
Sure.
This is going to be, I'll try to keep this moving in a linear fashion. Vision, mission, passion, goal, those are those are things that I think are largely like self-directed. Okay.
Okay.
Like this is what I want to do. Now, your motivations may be completely pure. Okay. They may be the most virtuous motivations in the world, but this is my mission. This is my vision for the future. Those, as far as I can tell, um, those are like self-directed. You decide what they're going to be. The epiphany I had, which is true for me and it may not be true for others, is that purpose is different. It is distinct. And that purpose is something that is imparted by something outside of you.
Mm.
So um, when you think about like a hammer, I don't have one handy, so I'll use this pen as an example, right? That hammer was designed by somebody
Yeah.
for a specific purpose. The
Yeah.
hammer didn't decide to be a hammer.
Mm.
And you can use a hammer for also, you can use a hammer to make turkey schnitzel. You can use a hammer to murder somebody. but that's not what it was designed for. That's not like the highest and best use of a hammer, right? And I think that we kind of operate that way as well, where um, for me, like the idea of I'm going to come up with my purpose
Mm.
stands in stark contrast to I'm going to discover my purpose,
Yeah, yeah.
right? This idea of what I'm called to exist outside of my own brain and my own heart and my in my body. And so I went through this exercise of like, what's my purpose? And I ended up writing um, that I exist to help people and places achieve their full potential.
Mm.
Like that's my purpose.
Mm.
Okay. So it could be a business, it could be an abandoned carpet factory, it could be somebody that I'm in a mentor relationship with. I don't ever talk about mentor mentee relationships. I think mentorship's bidirectional. I don't like the implicit hierarchy there. Um, and I felt like emboldened and empowered by this. And I was like, this feels so like true to me. And many of the things that I kind of beat myself up for historically, which is I have a tendency to be critical of, one could say everything. Um, the way something's designed or where they hung the painting in the living room, or how somebody's running their business. And these were all through kind of like a negative frame. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how I viewed it negatively as well. And I was able to kind of take that and turn that around 180 degrees, which is, I have a gift to kind of see potential and help it get realized.
Mm.
Okay. Um, and this was very freeing for me, by the way. It's actually allowed me to be less critical in the classic
Mm.
sense of the word, and I think a
Wow.
lot more helpful as time has
Well,
gone on.
as a time out right there, just as a
Yeah,
reference point, that's what you do by trade is you're a designer. Like that's
yeah,
you had a design like and you understand that there is a creator. There's somebody
yeah,
that is designed. Whatever that
mhm,
is, there's a
yeah,
designer behind the design.
yes,
And the fact that you realize I love the whole idea like I the design doesn't like the designer gave that design purpose.
right. Not the hammer,
Yes.
not the hammer. And so you asked, like, how have I carried that into maybe the workplace? After I went through this exercise, I was in a meeting with my partners, and as we try to do a few times a year, is kind of go back to just first principles. Is what we're doing working? Are we doing it the best way? Um, you know, where can we improve? We always like to say if we don't like our job, that's our fault. We can make our job whatever we want our job to be.
Yeah.
And we revisit these things frequently. And I came in and I said, instead of a mission statement or vision statement, I think we need to get down to brass tacks about our purpose, like this organization's purpose. And I give a lot of credit to my partners who are very smart, very experienced. I took my personal purpose statement and I laid it over High Alpha and with some tweaks. And we would now say our purpose is to help founders and the companies they lead reach their full potential. Okay. And that, if you don't interrogate the words and the intent behind the words, I'm not even sure you would go, oh, Kristian, wow, how insightful. But what's packed into those words, I think, is really important, specifically the word potential.
Mm.
And in the world of venture capital, like success is we made 10 times our money. We IPO'd. Everybody got rich. And the dark side of that is we will push people until they break.
Mm.
And we will push people into a world that they're not even desirous of, all in service at the altar of 10x returns or 100x returns, insert your whatever. Every time we invest in a business, we don't invest unless we think the potential for the business is outsized. That's the nature of venture capital.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, we're going to be wrong. That means that when we underwrite something, knowing that our failure rate is going to be enormous, we have to believe that some of these companies are going to be absolute breakout banger successes. And I would say that's kind of largely how the industry operates and how we operated for many years. But the idea of full potential doesn't mean a 10x return. I may be working with a founder in a marketplace, building a product whose full potential is, it looks very different. I've had to have many conversations with founders where I'm basically talking them into quitting, right? Because I can see that they're not going to achieve their fullest potential as an individual. And by virtue of that, certainly are not going to be able to lead the enterprise to its fullest potential if they stay in that same seat, right? I've wound companies down, pulled the plug on businesses where millions and millions of dollars of other people's money had been invested. And to have a purpose statement like that now kind of just reframes what I'm free to do. I'm free to set people free,
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
instead of them being enslaved to a kind of one size fits all version of success. Now, listen, I'm not going to be employed 5 years from now if I don't also ultimately generate returns for our investors.
Right.
But having the freedom to be able to reconcile that with my number one goal is to help these individuals and the companies that they're running reach their full potential and have a very open aperture in terms of what success looks like. And giving people the freedom to say, you know what, this was a terrible idea, or I'm not happy, or my marriage is failing, or I got it wrong, my assumptions were flawed. So that's kind of one example of an exercise I went through personally
Yeah.
that because of the generosity and of my partners and the faith that they have in me, that I was able to bring that into the enterprise itself.
Christian, man, we could there's so much out of this conversation. Um I'd love to continue to talk about how about this? Can you go back and can you give a brief description of the difference between what you think an entrepreneur is and a solo,
Yeah.
business guy? Like, can you
Yeah.
help me?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, of course.
Help
Of
me
course.
take my next best step in understanding
Yeah,
what I am.
man. Yeah, man. And by the way, this is the definition of an opinion, Brek, right? Like it's kind of how I've oriented my life around the distinction between those two things. I mean, first of all, I spent the bulk of my career as a small business person, like the operator of a small business. So I ran a design and innovation consultancy called Studio Science for many years. I was fortunate enough to sell that to private equity several years ago. But I, while I was running that, I never really kind of thought of myself as an entrepreneur, largely because my customers were entrepreneurs and I was able to see the distinction between those two things. And if I was going to summarize it, I would say a small business person is someone who builds something meant to work for them. Like in a small business, the business is the product. It's designed to generate steady income, to support a lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I think in general, on average, and we can talk about all the exceptions to the rule, but if you're running a restaurant or a dental practice or something like that, it is likely that you are a small business person. Um, the distinction to an entrepreneur is, so if a small business person is building something that's meant to work for them,
Yeah.
an entrepreneur is building something meant to outgrow them. The business is not the product, the business is a vehicle. It's not the destination. And it's designed to scale beyond that individual's personal labor. Um, Whereas a small business is probably trying to optimize for cash flow. An entrepreneur is trying to operate for enterprise value. And the best entrepreneurs build things that are designed to transcend them. Now, I mentioned dentist, HVAC owner, restaurateur. I know entrepreneurs who work in the dental space, who work in the HVAC space, who who work in dentists who own 8 clinics and have hired a CEO,
Mhm.
and the business is kind of far outstripping their ability to exert total dominion
Yeah.
over the enterprise. One is not better than the other. I personally have a deep affection for small business operators. I was one. I love investing in them. I
Mhm.
love supporting them. But I think fundamentally, it's like an important distinction. And it's one that I really try to educate would-be entrepreneurs on, because a lot of people don't, they're not trying to build something that transcends themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
That's
think
an incredible
that's
way
like fundamentally, at
to
least
describe
the
it.
kind of way, the way I think about it.
Yeah. Wow. That's really helpful. So, yeah,
And you can be,
I'm a
and it's
small
also
business
important.
owner.
Oh, the only thing other thing I would add is just you can operate entrepreneurially in any context.
Yes.
Okay. Just like I can operate athletically in certain contexts, but my core identity and the way I organize my life is not with the identity of I'm an athlete, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
right? So you can operate entrepreneurially inside of big businesses, inside of small businesses
Yeah.
as an
Okay.
operator. But Brek, I'm always just trying to drive to the crispest, most comprehensible, common understanding of a word. You'll hear this is like a recurring theme. You'll probably pick up on if you chat with me for any
Yes.
length of time, and it's just because if we don't if we have some vague kind of overlapping understanding of what words mean, it's very hard to have a conversation. It's very hard to actually have a relationship. Um, I think it was Kierkegaard who said, you cannot have a conversation until you both agree on the distinction between thesis and antithesis. So if you and I don't think black is black and white is white, we're not going to have a very productive conversation,
Yeah.
right? And there are just so many words that we use that have taken on so much baggage and kind of extraneous connotations.
Mhm.
And we don't interrogate that. We don't question that. We just kind of go along to get along and use these words and these kind of sweeping generalities. And I think it just makes it much, much harder to communicate and to get where we all want to go.
Yeah. Christian, I love it, man. Um, as we wrap up here today, man, you have literally invested in leaders. Um, you you see qualities, you it's dependent upon you to be able to see somebody or a group of leaders
Mm.
and go,
Yeah,
hey, um, I think you're worth betting on.
yeah,
Uh, it's my job to determine, do you have what it's going to take? Are you, or I see you here. Can you get to here? Can you
hmm,
lift the lid of potential? Can you lift the lid? I see you at a 5, but in order to get to what you're saying, what we need you to get to an 8. And
yeah,
you see that. That's part of your job every day.
yeah.
For a leader out there, what would be one or two things that you would say would help them lift the lid of their own personal potential leadership to be able to get to kind of their preferred destination? Like, just a couple of one or two just really practical next steps that might be helpful for them to be able to do that.
Ooh,
Anything come to mind?
big question there. Um, yeah, so I think I'm going to go back to purpose for a minute. I think good leaders are excellent at harmonizing purpose and potential. So any enterprise that's constituted of people um, has a difficult challenge, which is you need to understand what is the potential of the people I'm working with? What is the potential of this business?
Mm.
What is the potential of the market I'm serving? Is the market growing? Is it shrinking? Is it growing 10x a year? Is it growing 6x a year? Is it shrinking 13x a year? Those are kind of potential. Think about those, the potential axis on an XY axis, and then purpose, is what is the organization's, designed to achieve? And then what are the desires of the individuals within that? What is the purpose of the individuals I'm leading? So I have a purpose I have to steward for the enterprise.
Hmm.
And then I have the individuals I'm surrounded with and understanding kind of their purpose. So I think this art of rationalizing potential and purpose at the individual level and at the corporate level is like that in a nutshell is like what a leader does. Um, and that's why, and you can see a lot, to a hammer, if I can invoke that again, to the whole world's a nail, unless it's being used to make turkey schnitzel or kill somebody. That's what they call a callback, by the way, Breck. When I reference, yeah, that's a callback. Um, so I would encourage leaders uh, to focus on those two things, to constantly be reassessing the potential and the purpose of the organization, and then how that maps discreetly to the people on the team that you're managing, encouraging, um, uh, hopefully in the service of driving some type of flourishing. Um, Maybe the other thing I would say, and this is more of like a personal anecdote, okay? But I would say this is like a very contrary. I have a host of kind of contrarian beliefs. We can do another podcast someday, and we can just talk about our contrarian beliefs,
Yes.
okay? But one of the strongest contrarian beliefs I have is we live in a world where it's very fashionable right now to talk about saying no. So my hunch is, as a coach, Breck, you've probably, and I could be wrong here, I'm projecting, but you've probably encouraged a lot of your clients to get better at saying no.
Mm.
I think if you Google what are the top 10 attributes of successful entrepreneurs, after you get through the section where it says they get up at 5 a.m. and they meditate for 30 minutes and they go forest bathing or whatever, red light exposure, at some point on that list, you're going to get to a section that says focus. And great leaders say no to everything except for what matters most. That is that is standard operating procedure for high performers. Okay. Focus, say no, blah, blah, blah. In my experience, every good thing that has ever happened to me, Breck, professionally, personally, has been a function of me saying yes, not saying no.
Mm.
And so if I had an admonition for your clients, for your audience, um, it would be to reclaim yes
Wow.
as your default posture instead of no, and quit playing defense and start playing offense, to get off your heels and to get on the balls of your toes.
Mm.
You know, you have to step into the unknown.
Mm.
You have to embrace the mysterious. I mean, what is being curious? It's saying yes.
Yes. Right.
you know so I that's one that probably won't be very popular with your audience. Usually people take umbrage when I say it, and I'm only a data set of one, but I think we as a society, and certainly if you look at all of the writing that's been done over the last 20 years in business, there's just this overwhelming push to condition people to say, no, I've got to focus on my thing at the exclusion of everything else, and I don't have time to explore that or to indulge this or to be. And I just think I don't think it's a good path forward. Yeah, so I'll leave you with that. I would encourage people to experiment with having their default settings switched from no to yes.
Yes. Love it. Kristian, thanks, man. I appreciate it so much coming on here. If there was something that Kristian shared or we talked about that resonated with you, a story, attention point, man, don't rush past that. Think about it, listen, write it down, be curious enough to not just like, oh, that was just good intent or that was just good content. But no, here, what my encouragement is to stop, slow down, breathe, and
Mm,
really
mm,
think about, in these different areas of our life, how do we take the next best step forward? So,
mm.
hey,
Yeah.
if you enjoyed this, share this, subscribe, and man, until the next time, keep showing up, keep doing the inner work, and keep taking your next best step.
Mm. That's great. That's great. I know you're probably going to turn the video off at this point,
Yeah.
but um, I will tell you, your next best step was a huge encouragement to me this morning. I don't mean your podcast. I mean the word, your best next step. And I won't go into the details of what I was confronted with this morning, but that the title of your podcast and having just listened to a couple of them in advance was ringing in my ear
Mm,
today as I made a very small decision in terms of how I was going to respond to something. And that frame of just breaking everything that, like not worrying about what's going to happen at 11 a.m. or tomorrow or next week or next month. And just like right now, there is and there's a lot of situations where there's not a right answer or a wrong answer, but in every situation, there's a righter answer and a wronger answer,
yeah.
right? So just
Yeah.
directionally, one of those decisions is going to be at least incrementally more fruitful or more loving
Yeah.
than the other. And if I get nothing else out of today, if I get nothing else out of my relationship with you, which is laughable because I've already taken away so much more, but that like obvious thing
Mm,
um, has already had a big impact on me, and I've been able to like live into it a little bit today, like just today.
wow.
So thank you.
Awesome. Well, hey, when do you get in this weekend?
I'm gonna come in pretty early because